What if the greatest force a narcissist cannot conquer isn't anger, revenge, or confrontation, but a heart so deeply aware it chooses peace over chaos? What if true strength isn't about fighting louder, but about seeing with a clarity so sharp that lies, manipulation, and deceit collapse under their own weight? Imagine realizing that the quiet power of a healed, discerning soul can dismantle the strongest illusions, and that power lives inside a super empath. Welcome to the unstoppable truth. When a super empath awakens, no amount of deception can survive. It's not noise that defeats darkness. It's unwavering light. Only a super empath can destroy a narcissist. This is what makes them dangerous. You see there's something extraordinary about a person who feels everything so deeply that the world can barely understand them. A super empath doesn't just walk into a room and absorb the emotions of others. They discern them. They carry a radar that's not built by the world, but wired into their very soul by the one who sees all. And that radar, it picks up what others miss. Lies don't sit well around them. Hidden intentions feel heavy in their chest. A forced smile, a fake apology, an energy shift in the room while others are laughing and clapping. The super empath is already aware something isn't right here. They're not suspicious. They're not paranoid. They're gifted with a sensitivity so refined that it's often mistaken for weakness. But let me tell you something. This is no weakness. It's their greatest strength, because when a narcissist comes along putting on the charm, weaving their web, putting on their costume of perfection, the super empath might play along for a while, but deep inside, their spirit is already alert. Their heart has already whispered, "This one is not who they pretend to be." See, narcissists thrive on confusion, on fog, on making you second-guess your memory, your worth, your instinct. But a super empath, they don't just feel emotions, they decode them. That's what makes them so dangerous to a narcissist, because eventually that mask starts to slip. And while everyone else is still enchanted, the empath is already watching from a place of quiet knowing. They might not say a word at first, but they're gathering truth. And truth, my friend, is a weapon. The narcissist cannot survive. You see, most people give narcissist power because they can't see what's happening, but a super empath can see with their eyes closed. They operate in a realm beyond logic. It's not just psychology. It's spiritual discernment. The narcissist can gaslight, lie, twist stories, and play the victim, but the empath has already felt the coldness behind the smile. They've already picked up on the emotional manipulation. They've already sensed that something feels hollow and sharp under the surface. And here's the thing. A narcissist's greatest weapon is the illusion of control. They pretend to lead to love, to care, but they only care about control. And once a super empath sees through that illusion, the game is over. Because the only power the narcissist ever had was the belief that you couldn't see through them. But once they know you can, once they know you felt something that doesn't line up with what they're saying, once they realize they can't lie to you anymore, their entire house of cards starts to shake. Now, I'm not saying it happens overnight, because super empaths, they give chances, they forgive, they try to see the good in people. That's what makes them so beautiful. But even their patience has a holy limit. And when that moment comes, when they finally accept what they've been sensing all along, they don't just walk away. They walk away awake. And that kind of awakening, that's what the narcissist fears the most. Because now their charm doesn't work anymore. Their words sound empty. Their guilt trips fall flat. The super empath has shifted. They're no longer caught in the emotional maze they're standing at. They're looking in, saying, "I see you now." And when someone like that sees you, not just with their eyes, but with the clarity of their soul, your manipulation has nowhere left to hide. That's why only a super empath can destroy a narcissist, not with revenge, not with drama, but with discernment, with silence, with walking away. Not confused, but confident. Because there's nothing more terrifying to a narcissist than someone who sees exactly who they are and chooses peace anyway. And that peace, my friend, speaks louder than any confrontation ever. Could a narcissist lives in a world of mirrors, but none of them reflect truth. They craft a version of themselves. They want the world to admire, polished, flawless. Always the hero, always the victim, never the one responsible. And most people caught in the glare of that illusion start believing it. But not a super empath. No, super empath doesn't mirror illusion. They mirror truth and that kind of reflection. It doesn't just irritate the narcissist, it undoes them. You see, when a narcissist looks, at most people they see a blank screen. They can project but when they look at a super empath, they're confronted by something they've spent their whole life avoiding the truth of who they are. The truth isn't always spoken out loud. In fact, most of the time, it's not. It's felt. It's sensed. It's in the way. The empath listens with depth, the way they pause before responding, the way they don't fall for surface charm. There is a calm, quiet strength that says, "I see you, all of you." And that's not something the narcissist can handle, because a narcissist doesn't want to be seen. Not really. They want to be admired. They want applause without authenticity. They want to control the image while hiding the damage. But a super empath carries light, and wherever they go, things that have been hidden too long start to surface. The narcissist might call it overreacting, too emotional, too intense. But what they're really reacting to is truth. See, when you reflect truth, you don't have to raise your voice. You don't have to fight to expose anybody. You just have to be. Because truth is uncomfortable when you've been living in lies. And when a narcissist is standing in front of someone who sees past their mask, they start to feel the walls close. In the compliments, don't land the same. The manipulation doesn't bite. And the games, they fall flat. It's not because the empath is playing smarter. It's because the empath isn't playing at all. That's what makes them different. They don't compete. They don't pretend. They don't get pulled into power struggles. They just keep showing up with honesty, with vulnerability, with realness. And that realness, it begins to expose the hollowness of everything fake. Now, the narcissist might fight back. They might try harder. Love, bomb, gaslight, smear, your name anything to make you doubt what you feel. But the super empath doesn't reflect insecurity. They reflect character. And when you start holding up that kind of mirror, the narcissist is left staring at someone. They don't recognize themselves, and here's what's powerful. This reflection, this truth, it's not cruel. It's not vengeful. It's not about revenge or proving. who's right. It's about clarity. The super empath isn't out to destroy anyone. They're just not willing to dim their light to make someone else comfortable in the dark. They've learned the hard way that protecting someone's ego at the expense of their own sanity is no longer love. It's self-neglect. So they stop apologizing for seeing what they see. They stop shrinking to keeping the peace. They stop pretending they're confused when their soul already knows the answer. And the moment they start reflecting the truth, without fear, without guilt, without hesitation, that's when the narcissist realizes the mirror doesn't lie. You. See, the empath doesn't expose the narcissist by shouting who they are. They expose them by refusing to be fooled anymore, by refusing to play the part they were assigned in someone else's performance, by standing still while the narcissist scrambles to keep the illusion from collapsing. And when the illusion does collapse, and it always does, the only one left standing in peace is the one who refused to trade their truth for approval, because, at the end of the day, truth doesn't need to scream. It doesn't need to beg to be seen. It simply stands, and when it stands through a super empath, it becomes the very thing that sets them free. A super empath is naturally giving. Their first instinct is to pour out, to lift up, to heal what's broken. But life has a way of teaching even the softest hearts how to protect themselves. Because after you've been drained enough times, after you've been manipulated and taken for granted, something changes inside. You don't stop loving. You don't stop caring. But you start building boundaries. And let me tell you, when a super empath discovers the power of a boundary, everything changes. See, a narcissist thrives in spaces where boundaries don't exist. They look for the kind of person who keeps saying yes when they should be saying no. The kind who apologizes even when they did nothing wrong. The kind who tolerates mistreatment and calls it love. But once that super empath learns to draw the line, once they learn to say, that's enough, that's the beginning of the end for the narcissist. Because a boundary isn't just a rule, it's a revelation. It reveals the truth about the relationship. It separates manipulation from love. It forces the narcissist to confront something they never wanted to face, that their control isn't permanent, that the access they had wasn't a right. It was a privilege. And once a super empath realizes that they don't just pull back emotionally, they close the door with grace and strength, and they don't need to slam it to mean it. What most people don't understand is that boundaries aren't about keeping people out. They're about keeping yourself in, keeping your peace intact, keeping your identity from being chipped away by someone else's brokenness. A super empath isn't trying to punish anyone. They're not seeking revenge. They're reclaiming their space, their time, their mental clarity. And that to a narcissist is terrifying, because the moment an empath puts up a boundary, the narcissist starts to lose control. The games don't work anymore. The guilt trips bounce off, the emotional roller coaster grinds to a halt. Suddenly, the empath is no longer reacting. They're observing, no longer chasing. They're choosing, no longer trying to fix someone who doesn't want to be healed. They're focused on healing themselves. Now that shift doesn't always look dramatic. It's not always loud, but it's powerful, because a narcissist feeds on chaos. They need access to your emotions to keep the cycle going. They need you to question yourself to feel small, to beg for clarity. But once that boundary is in place, once the super empath stands firm and says, "I'm not available for this anymore," the narcissist is left with nothing to feed on. And it's not just about emotional boundaries, it's mental, spiritual. The empath starts praying differently, thinking differently, loving themselves more deeply. They start to see the difference between compassion and self-sacrifice, between forgiveness and foolishness, between hope and harmful patterns, and that wisdom becomes their armor. But here's the thing, a narcissist doesn't give up easily. The moment they feel that boundary go up, they'll try to test it, they'll push, they'll provoke, they'll act like they've changed. But the super empath, once awakened, no longer falls for words without action. They wait, they watch, they let patterns speak louder than promises, and they no longer feel guilty for protecting their soul. Because when you've been through the fire, when you've given your all and gotten pieces in return, when you've cried in silence and smiled in public just to keep things together, at some point, you stop letting people have easy access to you, not because you're bitter, but because you're finally aware. Aware of your worth, aware of your energy, aware of the fact that love should never cost you your peace. So the boundary goes up, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. Not because they don't care, but because they finally care about themselves too. And that boundary, it's not a wall, it's a door with a lock. And the key, it only fits in the hands of someone who comes with honor, not ego. When a super empath sets that kind of boundary, the narcissist doesn't just lose influence, they lose access. And when access is gone, control crumbles. That's why boundaries aren't just defense. You ever notice how a narcissist talks loud, but listens little? They dominate rooms, they center conversations, they twist stories to shine a light on themselves. They're always seeking validation, always drawing attention. But a super empath, they don't need to raise their voice to carry power. Their silence says more than most people shouting. And when they go quiet, really quiet, it's not because they've lost, it's because they've won. You see, the narcissist feeds on reaction. That's their fuel. They poke at your peace just to watch you flinch. They press your buttons just to remind themselves they still control the board. But a super empath, once they've seen through the game, doesn't react the way they used to. They stop explaining themselves. They stop defending their character. They stop wasting breath, trying to prove the truth to someone who's committed to misunderstanding them. Instead, they get still, and in that stillness, something powerful begins to happen. Because silence doesn't mean surrender, it means strategy. The empath has learned that words don't always change people, but boundaries do. Distance does, absence does. And when the narcissist realizes they no longer have access to the empath's energy, to their tears, to their loyalty, that silence becomes deafening. It echoes. It stings because the narcissist was counting on the empath to come back to break, to beg. But now there's just stillness, a quiet confidence, a holy kind of calm. And let me tell you, nothing confuses a narcissist more than not being able to provoke you when you stop reacting. They lose their grip when you stop responding to the bait. They start to unravel, and when you go silent, not to punish, but to protect, you're no longer playing their game. You're standing in a place of power, a place of spiritual discernment, a place where Your peace becomes your response. It takes strength to stay silent when your name is being dragged, when lies are being told, when the truth is being twisted. But a super empath has learned that silence doesn't mean weakness. It means wisdom, because, you know what? Sometimes letting people think what they want is the most powerful thing you can do. Because while they talk, you heal while they lie. You grow while they manipulate. You elevate. And in that silence, the empath finds something the narcissist will never understand: freedom. Freedom from the need to explain, freedom from the cycle of apology and confusion, freedom from the noise of someone else's ego. And that freedom, it's not loud, it's not flashy, but it's firm, it's grounded, it's holy, because a healed empath doesn't just disappear to prove a point. They disappear to reclaim their peace. They don't need to argue anymore. They don't need to expose anyone. They just leave the room mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and let time reveal everything that needs to be seen. And that kind of exit, it doesn't need an audience, because when a super empath walks away in silence, the shift is felt long after they're gone. That's what the narcissists never counted on. They thought they had you figured out. They thought your love would keep you stuck. They thought your empathy would be your weakness forever. But what they didn't see coming was your evolution. The moment you stopped chasing closure and started creating it within yourself. The moment you realized your silence doesn't mean you've lost your voice. It means you found your worth. And that worth is no longer negotiable. You've seen too much, felt too much, given too much, and now you've chosen peace over performance, stillness over struggle, healing over holding on. And that choice, it doesn't make a sound, but it changes everything. Because the greatest comeback is not noise, it's peace. There comes a point when a super empath doesn't just survive the narcissist storm, they rise above it. They don't just recover from the emotional chaos, they outgrow it. Because once you've seen the pattern, once you've healed the part of you that kept chasing broken love, you don't go back, not ever the same heart that once tolerated confusion, tolerated disrespect, tolerated the crumbs that came disguised as affection, now walks with clarity, and that clarity is powerful. You see, the super empath's greatest weapon isn't their love, it's their healing, because healing changes the whole equation. The narcissist expected the same response, the same tears, the same vulnerability they once used like a tool. But now they're faced with someone who no longer needs to be needed. Someone who has taken their power back without asking for permission. And when you do that, when you rise from the wreckage, they don't know what to do with you. Healing rewrites the rules. It quiets the chaos. It breaks the cycle. Because when a super empath heals, they no longer look for apologies to move on. They no longer hope for change in someone who's already shown them who they are. They stop holding on to potential, and they start holding on to peace. And that shift, that internal transformation, it sends a message, not a message of anger, not a message of revenge, but a message of resolve. I am no longer available for dysfunction. That's when the narcissist begins to feel it. Not because you called them out, not because you exposed their games, but because you're simply not there anymore. Not mentally, not emotionally, not spiritually. They realize they no longer have a seat at your table. And that table, it's now sacred ground. Only those who come with truth, with respect, with real love, only They are allowed to sit there, and you didn't need to shame them to get there. You didn't need to retaliate. All you did was heal. All you did was stop dancing in circles with someone who never planned to meet you. Halfway, that's what they never expected. They thought your kindness was endless. They thought your forgiveness was infinite. But now they see it was never weakness. It was grace. And even grace has a limit. When it's abused, a healed empath doesn't just walk away. They evolve. They look at the same situation that once broke them, and they say, "Thank you, Lord, for the lesson." Not because the pain was right, but because the pain woke them up. It taught them boundaries. It taught them discernment. It taught them how to love without losing themselves. And now they stand taller, wiser, stronger, not harder, but whole. And when someone becomes whole, they can no longer be controlled. That's the moment the narcissist realizes they didn't break the impact they built. The very thing they feared, someone who no longer responds to manipulation, who no longer settles for chaos, who no longer needs validation to know their value. The same empath who once stayed in confusion has now stepped into clarity. And that clarity rooted in healing destroys the power the narcissist once had. But it's not just about escaping the narcissist. It's about stepping fully into purpose, because a healed super empath doesn't just leave. They rise. They pour their energy into things that matter. They build. They create. They serve. They speak life into others. They become a lighthouse, not just for themselves, but for others walking through the same dark waters they once swam in. And the narcissist, they are left behind wondering how they lost control, wondering why the same tactics no longer work, wondering why silence now speaks louder than words, but it's not a mystery. The answer is simple. The super empath healed, and that healing was their victory. Healing doesn't just restore what was broken, it redefines everything. A super empath who has seen the games, felt the betrayal, and chosen healing over retaliation carries a strength few can comprehend. They no longer chase validation. They no longer seek closure. They no longer waste their energy in battles meant to exhaust them. Instead, they rise quietly, powerfully, and permanently. Because when you embody truth, you don't have to expose anything. You simply live free, and freedom itself becomes the loudest message of all.